So Jim Maroney was born and raised on Tipperary Hill in Syracuse in the 1940s. He's still with us. Jim spent the 60s trying to find himself at 4 local colleges. He finally found himself, I don't know if I'm going to say this right, Da Nang, Vietnam. Did I say that right?
Right.
In 1969, as a triage worker on the hospital ship Sanctuary. He knew then that his calling was to be of service to others. Jim has a master's degree in school psychology and mental health counseling. He formally retired in 2015 after 30 years as a chairman of the Committee of Special Education. He also served 5 years on the State Board of Veterinary Medicine. Jim has been a member of the Empire Club since the early 1970s. How long ago was that? He has served several times as president and show chairman. When the club members numbered over 500 members, he also was vice chairman of the Region 16. His farm, Ennis Diamond, has housed many champions, and his breeding stallions have sired many champions. He has conducted clinics on the Arabian horse for many groups, including 4-H, school classes, scouts, and even an elder hostel. Really?
Old people.
Really? Really? Jim has had a long career as a ringmaster and an open show judge. His presentation this evening is titled Memories with a Message.
Howdy, y'all. I want you to know my first memory that is very vivid in my mind and frequently recurs in the middle of the night. My brother was 1 and I was 2, and we were in the bathtub, and my grandmother was giving me a bath. And she was an Irish woman who was diabetic and also liked her sherry. So she fell into the tub, smashing the bridge of her nose and bleeding into the tub. Now, that's the memory that I wake up with frequently. It's certainly, I know my memory works because it shows up all the time.
As a psychologist, what does that mean?
Blood on the pillow. Then, to get to the horse part, my grandmother used to drive, my other grandmother used to drive a hitch back and forth between Manoa and Syracuse, a single horse hitch. So there was kind of a horse thing in the family. And our milkman, George Gedney, had a horse named Dobbin. He drove Dobbin to deliver milk. There was a truck full of ice, and we'd go out, and I'd pet Dobbin, and they'd get the milk, and he had to return the bottles that he used. So, and then we had a photo man that came around, and he would bring chaps, a hat, a pony, and you got your picture taken for $5. So that guy, I don't know where he is now, but I subscribed to all of those things. The books in the house were Misty of Chincoteague and the big colorful book of horses by Wesley Dennis. That was all available to me when I was a little kid growing up. I took care of the pony in the petting zoo at the Gifford Zoo when it was just where the lions were just in a cage going, feed me. But I took care of that pony 3 days a week, and he looked like Misty of Chincoteague. So that was my first introduction. But all of these horses were kind of interchangeable. None of them had touched my soul, so to speak. So then, after my dad was a friend of Walter Farley. Walter Farley grew up in Syracuse, and he lived around the corner from my dad's house. So Walter Farley wrote the Black Stallion and the Island Stallion series, and my dad made sure that those books were in the house for me to learn early about Arabian horses. So Arabians were like a foreign element to me. I had never seen one. You could read about them. You could fantasize what they were like, and they were always described beautifully, but there were no movies of the Black Stallion at that point. So I took lessons at Cavalry Club from John Bass. I jumped fences and all that kind of stuff, but never identified with the horse, never touched, no horse touched me in my soul. So I went to an open show with a friend where they had fence classes and they had some horses that were just pleasure classes. And in one of the pleasure classes was a half Arabian, Palomino, mare by Naharan. And Naharan he's all crabbit breeding, and he was very famous in this country and made a lot of babies. But he, I said, where did you get this horse? How did you get a horse like this that looks like this? And they told me about Sun Shadows and that Naharan was there and it was near Buffalo. And so my uncle lived in Buffalo, so I shagged him up and said, can you take me to Clarence, New York? And he said, yeah. Well, so we ended up at Sun Shadows anyway, and I got to see Naharan. And that changed my life. He had beautiful, big, black eyes, a real dish face. He was breeding a lot of mares. There was another stallion called Hazem Bey there that was a crabbit horse that was imported. So this is Naharan, and the Highwind farm, which was near Clarence, they had a bunch of Naharan babies. One of my favorite horses ever in the show ring was a horse called Highwind Joshua, and he was a liver chestnut. This horse carried a gene for liver, and his sire Gloucester was a dark liver chestnut. So he made lots of babies, and Highwind Joshua was a chestnut with 4 white socks, and there was a judge named Lyman Orcutt who had Morgans, but he judged Arab shows. Lyman Orcutt would take Joshua in a class of 10, 15 halter horses, and he put him in 5th place. Then he'd go and he'd look at the 5th place horse and the 4th place horse, and he'd move them up. And he did that till he put him in 1st place. But the crowd would get into it. They were all screaming and they were enthusiastic. Yes, Joshua was going to win. So, and he won a lot. But it also kind of created in my mind this notion of a horse that is flashy. And he had liver chestnut with blonde mane and tail and white socks. He was very fancy. So anyway, that was our first trip with the Arabian horse, was to see Naharan. And then I got to the point where I wanted to see more of them. So I went and looked for other farms that were in the area. I'm trying to find that sheet. There were tons of farms in New York State that were Arabian breeding farms. They were breeding more than 10 mares a year. There were babies all over the place. I never knew that there were Arabians out there, but they were all over the place. I ended up in Weedsport at Peggy Harris's Hidden Springs farm. Okay. Naharan's slow. But when we went to Hidden Springs, they had 2 stallions there that were, one was a Seraphic son, his name was Tornado Talisman, and the other one was, she had Alma Grandi, but the 2 horses that were breeding at that point, the other horse was Aries, who is going to get here soon. But
How old were you, Jim, when you first saw this horse? How old were you?
It was after I came back from Vietnam, so I was in my mid-20s. And it will go. Okay. So Peggy Harris had a horse named Asir. Asir was injured at the Coliseum and had to be put to sleep. But Asir had sired Say Rasir and Say Aladdin, two horses that many are in many of the pedigrees around here today, if you go back far enough. So Aries was a Basque son, and Tornado Talisman was a Seraphic son. At that time, Seraphics and Basque were the two hottest horses in the whole country. You couldn't, and Aries, they were very different horses. Aries was petite, very beautiful, big poppy eyes, and he could canter in place just forever. And Tornado Talisman, this is the year after Peggy's mare, Say Cherie, had been national champion futurity filly. And that was in a huge class of horses. And Say Cherie was bred to Basque and produced the Chief Justice, who is in a lot of famous pedigrees today. So.
My mom's like 5, but this hasn't caught up.
Okay. So in 1974, I felt that I was ready to have my own stallion. I don't know if we're gonna. My stallion, I bought from Peggy before he was born. I didn't care what it was. He was by Say Aladdin, and he had a full sister named Say Chantilly that was older, that won many ribbons, and Galen knows that whole bloodline. She had a sister too. And so we, without knowing anything, I brought my colt home from Peggy's in 1974. I had to board him for a couple of months while we put up a barn. And his name was Say Magnifique, and he was the sire of many, many, many horses that won an awful lot in this area. One of my favorite stories is when I was judging an open show, Jamie Pomisano-Chachowski, she came to the show. When I judge open shows, the people who brought Arabian horses to me kind of figured, well, he's an Arab judge, so we can start a green horse there. So I'd get the Arabs there, and they'd run through the bridle and bump into other horses and all that kind of stuff. I couldn't use them, and people would come up to me and say, I brought the Arab here for you to see. And I said, well, I saw him, but there wasn't much I could do about it. But Jamie had a horse that was a regional champion that her name was Monique, and she came to a show. One of the college programs had brought their judging team, and horse equine team, Morrisville, had brought a whole team to the show. And at the show, she showed the horse Western first, which was not the best class for her. But then she showed her in the Hunter division. And when I called for a transition from canter to hand gallop, that horse just bowed up, lifted her head, took off, and did a really beautiful hand gallop. After she won all her Hunter classes, and after I was leaning against the rail like this, and the coach from the team came up behind me and said, you really know how to showcase an Arab. Well, it's true. There is nothing like a beautiful Arabian moving at a hand gallop like they would across the desert. So the other thing is that Say Magnifique, we brought him to an open show. Joe Gold used to ride with a saddleless, bridleless quadrille team, and she would ride anything, and she wanted to ride him. He'd never worn a costume. He'd never been in a show ring other than halter, and she wanted to ride him, so I said, okay. She got her costume on him, and I was the announcer, and the horses came in the ring, and there were probably 4 or 5 costume horses, and this was at an open showgrounds, and some of the people from other breeds were there. So I called for, they cantered into the ring, called for a hand gallop, called for a walk. Say Magnifique was cantering and cantering and cantering and cantering and never stopped. And she had to reverse him across the middle of the ring to get him to change lead. and he still cantered and hand galloped through the, there was never an end to it, and I was kind of laughing like a loon up in the announcer's booth, but he never,
Still trying.
okay, he never made it to, he did not get a ribbon. After I had C'est Magnifique, who was a wonderful horse. He had great personality. He was quiet. He was easy to be with. He did get loose once and found a mare down the road, and whenever he came close to getting loose, I knew where he was going. So, but he was at Bruce and Jan Abbott's. If he wasn't home, he was down there talking to the girls. So, and then I once rode him over to a friend's farm who was boarding a mare that was there for breeding, and he wouldn't go home. He did the breeding, and then I could not get him to turn around and go home. So I backed him a half a mile over a bridge that had a 20-foot drop. That's Aries. That's the boss son that Peggy had. At the point when Peggy had these horses, there were like 15 farms in New York State that were breeding, having 10 babies a year. Kathy and Lee Town, they always had horses in the barn. And the Boston Serifex cross was a magic cross. It was exactly what the Chief Justice was. So I'm thinking that if we had more people taking our good horses to open shows and stop preaching to the choir, you might find more people coming into this breed, because there's nothing as beautiful as an Arab when it's doing the right thing. It doesn't stop for them. I had, after we had C'est Magnifique, we also had a horse called Capital Gains. He was by a Basque son out of a Kemosabe daughter, and he was black bay, 4 stockings, white strip. I showed him myself at the Nationals, and he was top 10 in the security class. This is Tornado Talisman, who had a great body. He had big eyes, good ears, but he was a little flat in the profile, and not all judges liked him. This is a seer who broke his leg at the Coliseum, and he is he's the sire of Say Aladdin and Say Rasir, which are in many of the pedigrees of our horses today. Do we have?
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
about 3 slides ahead of what's
Okay.
showing.
Okay. The reason Capital Gains is, it would take him 40 minutes to breed a horse, because he would kiss them, he would snuggle up to them. He just loved his girls. And 40 minutes would be, this is a horse by Tornado Talisman that I showed, and believe it or not, that you could use your hat to have the horse stretch their neck. This was before they established the new pose so that the horse arches their neck. This was when you could just stand a horse still. And I kind of learned that from other people. This is C'est Magnifique in a painting done by Jean Mellon Herrick, who was the queen of the Morgan breed. She also did bronzes of Justin Morgan. She's in, the last name she was in England, but she did this from some pictures that we had of C'est Magnifique. He was actually ridden by his owner on some occasions when there were deep snowbanks, in case anything happened. In case he wanted to go to the mirror next door. He was a good trail horse. He would go places in company all the time. He was a good horse. I taught him to rear. Probably not the smartest thing I ever did, but he did it. He knew how to do it anyway. And the next horse will be Capital Gains, and I want to use him as an example of what breedability is. So this is Capital Gains, and he was very fancy, and he broke P2 when he was 4, but I had shown him and he was top 10 at the Nationals, and he looks like Kemosabe. When he came in the ring, he looked like Kemosabe, and they used to make Kemosabe rear and walk on his back legs. And so I taught him to rear and walk on his back legs. And that's how he in a class of 39, he was third, sixth, and ninth. This is a foal of his, and it shows, this was out of an almost white Pinto mare. So it shows what breedability is. That Capital Gains made babies that look like him. Not all stallions do that, but when they do, this was a yearling, but it was out of a Pinto mare, and it's marked almost exactly like him. And then when they rode him, his name was Capital Creation, and he was also very willing, very honest under saddle. So that would be that's Capital Creation under saddle. The next horse that I want you to learn about is, his name was C.D. Spellbinder, and he was by Gaffazon. He came from California, and when he was trained by a trainer named, his last name was Lewis. To get him to arch his neck and suck back and tighten his body, they would put him in water and stick electric wires into the water and shock him, and that's spelling. But he came to live with me for a while. I was working for a farm in Florida called Royal Pomeranians, and he was their second string stallion, and they let him stay with me some of the time. But they also had another stallion there, and his name was Zar Hassan, and he'd been national champion in Canada, reserve national champion in the United States. And when I went to work for them, this is Spellbinder just trotting along. But he was very kind, he was very sweet, and if he got nervous, he'd stick his tongue out and he'd want you to scratch his tongue. And he was just as sweet a horse as you could want. But their main stallion had those titles going for him, and he was syndicated. And I went to Florida every other weekend. I was going back and forth and showing Spellbinder. We were the pioneers for the Liberty class. I was the Lone Ranger. I had a mask, and he would flag his tail and trot around, and we used the William Tell Overture, and we didn't lose ever when he was in the ring. He was a great horse, just one of the sweetest horses ever. This is Zar Hassan, and I think you won't find him in many pedigrees. He found her at the day he was supposed to go in for the national finals. At least they said he found him. I'm at the end of the line on that horse with my glove like as far out as I could get it. He had already bitten off his groom's 2 fingers, and he had picked up a girl by her shoulder and thrown her out of the stall. They had a syndicate meeting the weekend, and this is Shah Nishan, who attacked at the Midwest Training Center. He attacked the ceramic statue, white statue of a stallion outside the Midwest Training Center. And David was showing him, Rick Mosier was showing Zar, and I had Spellbinder in the stallion class in Albuquerque. And Sam, the owner said, if that horse gets loose, you get Spellbinder between him and Zar Hassan. Can you hold it for a second? Okay. And Zar is, I was terrified. I was on the polo fields in outside Florida, or Miami, Wellington, where they have 3 or 4 polo fields in a row. And I was standing at the end. Okay. I was standing way at the end of the line, and then Sam said, I want you to ride back in the trailer with him. And I was like, but he was fine, as long as I could pet him and talk to him. And he was fine. He didn't try and eat me. But that, yeah, and to be in the ring with Spellbinder and be told you have to get Spellbinder between those 2 stallions, and about 30 seconds in, David shanks Shah Nishan and halter breaks. So he's loose, but thank God he never came near Zar. I wouldn't come near Zar either, but I don't think either Shah Nishan nor Zara Hassan have a lot of babies. I just think you won't find it in a parable. At the syndicate meeting that went on while we were down there doing those pictures with Polynol, Sam tried to act like there's nothing really wrong with Zara Hassan. So he was in the stall, and the horse is chained to the wall, and he's holding on to the line, and the horse reaches over and bites him in the chest. And he was just acting like, that's, but then the blood started coming through his shirt, and the people in the syndicate are like staring at him like, I don't think he got syndicated. Anyway, Capital Gains broke P2 in his foot, and we did a prosthesis, we tried to keep him alive, and he lasted 2 months at Cornell. We got him a goat. The goat hated Capital Gains, and Capital Gains was afraid of the goat. So we ended up having to put him to sleep, and that was just a very sad part of my life. A friend of mine came to me and said, why don't you get another stallion? And Bob Chundarian became my partner in Sensational Bay. We bought him the year Shatina was reserve national champion, and she was going back to the next year to compete for the national champion there. So he's a full brother to Shatina and Betina, both of whom were national champions. And he was another wonderful, kind, sweet, good horse. His semen would not hold up in extender, so we had to do live cover with him all the time. So he bred a lot of horses, had a lot of regional champions, a couple of reserve national champion performance and halter horses, and he was a wonderful horse to be around. And he lasted with us for 20 years. This is one of his daughters with Dan, the man on her. Her name is Dynasty, and she won a lot. She was out of a very small mare. This was a big, substantial mare. She was a full sister to Eon, who also won a lot of things. So, and Dan could make those horses do what he liked. And he was a great trainer for us to have around. And I feel sorry for him this weekend, but he's a great friend and a good person. The next horse we're going to put up here is part of the Mathers clan. This is a young lady named Stephanie. And things started to get really busy at our farm at this point. We had a lot of mares in for Sensational Bay. This was, my partner in Sensational Bay had a pure Polish mare, and this is by Emma Santana out of a Garance squatter. And that's Stephanie, 14 years old, riding the horse to regional champion park horse. And in that class, she beat the horse that was national champion that same year. His name was Sevan, K.S. Sevan, which means son, and he was a fancy horse, could really trot. Now it's going to go fast. Now, because we were being busy at the farm, we created a lot of things for people to see. This is Sweet Pea, and she has a McDonald's stuffed monkey. She slept with that every night, but she was a big draw. She was really cute and sweet. We had 70 kids come here one day, and I came out of the house with Sweet Pea. I had her on a leash, and she was up on my head, and we came over the brow of the hill, and she pooped on my head because of all the kids. And when she pooped on my head, the teacher, and the wonderful teacher friend that he is, had the kids draw pictures and send them. This is Mona, and we had her for 22 years, and we had several camels, and this is one of her young friends who's now graduating from high school. But Mona she would give rides. We did have one kid and we also had kangaroos, which certainly kept everybody entertained. When he was finished, he was taller than I was, and he didn't like me telling him what to do. He was big, and they bounce off their tail, and they have long toenails and try and stick them through you. So it was always an adventure to move him from one place to another. So we did get little goats, which made everything a lot
baby goats.
easier and more fun around, then the thing that we really lucked out on is that we were able to get us a
Maybe.
Almost.
straw, a unicorn. So
it's a unicorn.
this is Addie on Candy Valentine, who has been shown around here for years and years. She's 26 this year, and she's the kind of horse everybody needs on the farm. When 4-H people come, when she's typey, she has all the classic things you want a horse to have. She has beautiful eyes. Her ears really are tippy. She does these kind of things for us. This is a bus garage crew. We also have a Christmas tree in the barn from November until April, so people can do their next year's Christmas cards with the horse, so they can come in and, so this is the bus crew with the tree and Candy. But Candy's always willing and available to come have her picture taken. This horse, his name is W.N. Moniat, not Moniat, and there's a YouTube of him. I showed him once, and he was reserve champion at the show, but he was buying a boar out of an Ibn Moniat on the Fußdauer, and he now has a YouTube video of catching a frisbee. The guy who loved him, this is not the same horse, but the guy loved him and taught him to catch a frisbee, his owner. So he was on the Sunday morning program where they show kind of kitschy stuff, but I think you can find it. You can tell people you know an Arab that catches frisbees. This is Center Rain, and he had some bad treatment early in his life. Whoa, my God. Anyway, the purpose here is to show you that if you have these kind of horses around, you can bring anyone to the farm and not worry about them, and that they're going to take care of them. This is my stallion with Alex, and it's just nice to have that kind of a horse around. And Alex has worked there for a couple of years. He knows how to stand up a halter horse. Many people, Joe Alberti learned his first halter lessons from me. We kind of changed the way halter was being shown during my tenure early on in the 70s. So, and this is Candy, and she has oxygen on, and we just turn her loose, and she'll walk around. We had 12 4-H kids, and a big crew of parents with them, and I just opened her stall door, and she walked into that group of people. You kind of can't ask for a better ambassador than that to make people feel confident that the world, and this, again, she's just so beautiful. We used her for a while with a photographer would come, and she'd schedule kids every 15 minutes to come, and she would Photoshop it so that it looked like a real unicorn. And Candy would stand there for an hour just licking people. That's Caitlin, Quillen, and Candy at a horse show when she was young. I think having that kind of reputation is a lot better than when you see the stallions in the Middle East now. This is a horse that was part of a herd of 50 straight Russian horses. She's not straight Russian, but the entire 50 horses were sent to slaughter because the owners wanted to change to straight Egyptian breeding. So this horse, people contacted me and asked me if I could help save her. This is her now, and this photography is Lyle Connor photography. He just started learning this last year, came and did some photo shoots for us. But this is a horse that loves people, and she doesn't deserve to be in a slaughter place anywhere. She's now in foal to my stallion, and we're looking forward to that. She is like this all the time. She is all over you trying to be your friend. And this is her and the other mare that's in foal to true. The other mare has Spellbinder, Same on Your Feet, and Spellbinder, Same on Your Feet, and Capital Gains in her pedigree. So they're gonna foal about the same time, and they have a happy life. And I think inviting people to be around, these are two horses that belong to friends of mine, a friend of mine who's old and aging, and this one's by Night Star that Wendy has at her barn, and her mother is by Pomerol. I worry about, we have to look for a soft place for these horses to land. If you know that you're in trouble health-wise, you gotta start thinking, find a safe place for them. Don't put them in danger. Don't give them another place to regret being. So that's, she's back. Mona would give rides. My cousin came to ride her once, and he got up on her hump, and when you get on and off, you make them go down on their knees. So when he was finished riding her, she cushed and he slid down off her hump. That scared her, so she stood up, and he slid up on top of her head. And so it was kind of a disaster situation, but in any event, I think we welcome you anytime to come to the farm. We love having people there, and I do think that the more people are exposed to these kind of horses, the more likely they are to want one of their own. Lisa and Warren have a beautiful mare by Eden C at our farm. She's going to have a baby. She's out of a fire baby daughter. She's going to have a baby this spring by Bugatti. So we welcome you all to come, and I hope all of you encourage other people to come visit you and see and learn what the Arab can do and how well they can do it. So thank you, Jim.